very important thing to do.
And I got to tell you, I get so many fathers who complain that mom didn't send them the information, and I think you're absolutely right. Is you know, although that's a problem on mom's side too, they need to be taking responsibility. They need to be at the school and make sure that they're getting copies, as opposed to just simply sitting back and complaining about the fact that mom didn't send them copies.
Yeah, I think that's, I just can't emphasize that one enough, is that nothing is going to happen unless the guys stand up and say, I need something to change here. Because people are not just going to do it themselves. And the people are not just going to say, look, we got to make it better. Except I should say there's one group that's the exception to this, and that's the second wives. I've talked to so many women who are married to a divorced or single father who are outraged by the kinds of stuff that's going on in his life that are keeping him away from his kids. And these women, the second wives, are often at the forefront of trying to get some things to change. It's an interesting dynamic that even with these very active women, the guys sometimes will just sit back and take it.
Right, right. Now, you touched on something that I found pretty interesting, and I'm going to go back to just a little bit, and that the fact that women are really the only gender who can breastfeed a child. What do you do when there is an infant who is being breastfed? The parents are split up. I mean, what do you tell that dad? How do they fight for custody? How do they have good custody time if they can't breastfeed the baby?
Well, I think when you're dealing with an infant, it's a little bit of a different situation. It's going to be harder, really and truly, to have the child on overnight visits, I think. But there's no reason why the dad can't come every day and can't take the baby out for a walk, can't hold the baby, can't give the baby bottles if that's what the mom is doing. And a lot of women will pump enough milk during the day so that there could be bottles at night. And if that's the case, then he can go over, grab the bottles, put them in the refrigerator, and have the baby at night in that case. But I think with a breastfeeding infant, it's a little harder. But again, there's no reason why you can't have the phrase, you're probably more familiar with it than I am, frequent and continuing contact.
Right. An ever-present phrase in all litigation.
Yeah, and he should be able to see those kids as often as he wants. And the nice thing about it is that I think so many women don't realize is, you want to do this on your own? You want to deal with a crying baby that's breastfeeding and crawling all over you all day long? It's going to be wonderful to have your ex-husband, even if you don't particularly care for the guy, come and take the baby away for a little while.
Right.
So you can sleep.
Absolutely. And I tell clients a lot of times that it's important to be the bigger person sometimes when it comes to your kids, because the parties don't really, the mother and the father, they might not like each other anymore because they're divorced. They both have a responsibility to put that aside for the kids. And if the mother's not doing it, the father, as a father in their child's life, really needs to be the bigger person and put that aside as much as possible.
Absolutely. This is a topic that comes up in talks that I give in various places around the country. And in talking to women's groups, I try to explain to them some of the things that I talk about in Throwaway Dads and all of the other books about how critically important fathers are to their children's development. And that when fathers are involved with their kids' lives, they do better in school. They're more likely to have straight A's. They're much less likely to get involved in drugs and alcohol. They're generally healthier. They're happier. They have better friends. It's a really kind of an amazing amount of positive benefit to having fathers there. I think so many women don't understand that. And if they did, they would be less inclined to interfere with the relationship between the father and the children. And I think that goes the other way as well. I mean, I don't want to suggest by any stretch that fathers are purely the victims of this kind of thing. I think there are an unfortunate number of guys who are behaving like jerks too, and they need to understand how important the mother is. But to get back to your point about, they need to basically, whatever it is, put their stuff aside, their own individual little hostilities, and keep in mind the best interests of the child. It's another phrase you probably use 50 times a day.
Oh, yeah.
You need to keep in mind that by alienating the other parent, by saying bad things about the other parent, by making it hard for the other parent of whatever gender to see the child, to take the child, by making nasty phone calls, by being late to pick up or drop off the child, that those those are the kinds of things that are putting the kid in the middle, and you're going to make that child miserable.
Right.
There's, the research is very, very conclusive on this, that one of the best predictors about how children are going to do after divorce is the level of conflict between the parents. And if the parents are able to keep it civil, at least in front of the kids are going to be much, much better off.
Right. Absolutely. And just sort of as a slight aside, for those fathers who are listening who are divorcing, being an active father is very important to your litigation as well, because the more active you are, the more things that you know, the doctor's names, the kids' extracurricular activities, the more things that you can say you've been to. It's really going to help you in terms of a custody dispute. And obviously that is on the forefront of most divorcing fathers' minds is how's my custody dispute going to go. So that's important to keep in mind.
I've been hearing kind of through the grapevine a little bit, and I'm wondering if you've had a chance to deal with any cases like this of soldiers who are off in Afghanistan or Iraq. They come back, they were divorced before they went. They come back, and their wife or ex-wife is now demanding sole custody, and they go to court, and the judge basically says, well, you didn't spend any time with your kids for the last year. And the guy's response is, well, geez, I've been out of the country fighting for my country. Don't you think I should get a break on that one? And it's just amazing, at least the stories that I hear, how silly these judges can be sometimes, and not taking into consideration the reality of the situation. But either way, it's as much as you possibly can. The more you can be there and the more you can be involved, the better chance you have of having that continue after the divorce. Right,
and of course the Iraq, Afghanistan, that's sort of a very, very extreme example of a father who is just a primary breadwinner and works very long hours, so maybe he hasn't had the opportunity to be as involved as maybe he would like to be. But that was sort of the role that he and his wife decided that he should play in the marriage. Iraq or Afghanistan, that's, like I said, very extreme in that you can't be there at all.
Right.
But would a court deal with that the same way? And I haven't had the opportunity to litigate that issue, but that's very interesting, and obviously it would depend on your judge, I think, as to your outcome.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the way that judges look at these things, and just not taking everything into consideration. It's unfortunate.
Can you give us some steps that a man who maybe never had an active father can take to become a better father, a better role model for his kids?
Well, the first thing he needs to do, are you talking about a divorced father who's got occasional access to his kids, or giving you...
Really, any father, divorced or not.
Well, let's start with the not side of things. So if you're in an intact relationship, whether it's a marriage or you're living with the mother of the child, the most important thing to do is kind of what you alluded to before, which is get involved. You cannot sit and wait for things to happen, and that can start with an infant. The separation of dads from their kids starts very, very young. You've got nobody really wants to cry to change a dirty diaper. Nobody loves that stuff. Nobody really wants to deal with a crying baby, but when moms come into a room where there's a dad sitting there and she says, oh, honey, the baby needs to be changed, let me do it. Or she says, oh, the baby's crying, let me take him. It's easy to hand the baby over in those kinds of situations. But that's doing the dad a tremendous disservice, because the way that the mom figured out how to change the diaper quickly or how to soothe the baby is by making a ton of mistakes. And he needs to be able to make his own mistakes, because that's where confidence comes from as a parent, is you know that you can make a mistake, you know that your kids will survive, you'll survive, and then now you know what works. So taking those first steps, not being afraid to jump in and look like an idiot for a little while if that's what it takes, and that's the way it is for all of us when we were new parents, is you do the most ridiculous things. And then as that goes on, to stay involved in every possible way you can. Volunteer in your child's school. I used to do that when my kids were in elementary school. I was in there reading stories to them when they were in kindergarten and talking about kind of as a guest author coming in.